Hello, everyone, and welcome to Textiles and Tea with the Handweavers Guild of America. I'm Kathy Group. I'm with the advertising department, and I get to be your host today. Today, our sponsor is Tapestry Weavers South. We are so excited to have them today. They're a wonderful group here in the South, of course, that support tapestry through education and exhibits. And we are excited to have them. We will take questions as usual for the last 15 minutes of the session today. If you would, please put them in the Q&A and not in the chat. I have a hard time seeing them in chat. We love your comments, though, in the chat. Please keep those coming, but move those questions over to Q&A so we can make sure we get to those. Today, we have the one, the only, Connie Lippert. Excited to have Connie on the show today. Connie has been working for years and doing tapestry weaving, and she has exhibited throughout the 30 states, probably even more. She's received several artist grants from the South Carolina Arts Commission. Her work is represented in museums, in corporate, academia, private collections, and she is widely published. Her tapestries are represented in several new books, including Tapestry Design Basics and Beyond by Tommye Scanlin. A beautiful, beautiful book, and it's exciting that our work is in there. The Art is the Cloth by Micala Sidore, and The Art of Tapestry Weaving by Rebecca Mezoff. Are those not the big three? Connie's journey with weaving is documented in a book by author Carole Green in Connie Lippert, A Wedge Weaver's Storied Cloth. She has taught wedge weave workshops and given seminars throughout the United States. We are always excited when we have her at Convergence, and we're excited to have her here today too. Hi, Connie.
Hello. Hi, Kathy. How are you? Thank you for the nice introduction. And thank you to Tapestry Weavers South for sponsoring this episode.
Connie, I think Kathy's camera has frozen, so
I think so too.
We're going to be just a moment. Technical issues, they happen. This is Elizabeth. I'm going to fill in for Kathy, and I'm going to ask you, what is your favorite tea? That's how we like to start this session.
My favorite tea, I have many favorites, but today I thought I would share with you a tea that actually has grown about 45 minutes from me at the Table Rock Tea Company. Table Rock is a state park, a very famous state park in South Carolina, and a couple started a tea farm there a few years ago. I went on a tour there 2 or 3 years ago and bought a little tea plant, and now it's growing in my yard and it's grown quite a bit. So Table Rock Tea Company is the tea I'm having today.
Nice. All right, stand by. Connie, I'm Mandy Drumming. I'm the programs coordinator. I bet Elizabeth's probably conversing with Kathy. Okay. Here we go. I think they're coming on now.
Okay.
Well, while we wait, let's just ask you the next. The next question here. And how did you get started in fiber?
Well, I had never seen a loom or any type of hand weaving, but a friend of mine said she was interested in weaving. And at the time I was in the art program at Auburn University. So I just wandered over to the home ec department where they teach weaving. And I stuck my head in this room that was full of looms. And I thought, I need to do this. So I took basic weaving. It was a quarter course. And then I took pattern weaving. It was another quarter. And then I took rug weaving, and that was all they had. I took everything they had. And then a group of us students who were in the classes formed an independent study on natural dyes. We did that. So I was fully immersed in love after that. But it was not in the art department. It was in home ec. So I'd taken everything that was available to me.
I see Kathy's back. I think she's just on mute. Let's see. Oh dear, she freeze again. All right. Let's see. Well, go ahead and continue. We'll roll with it. I will, and we'll get Kathy fixed up here in a second. So let's first, will you explain what wedge weave technique is? And second, will you share the history of this technique, Connie?
Okay. Wedge weave is basically weaving on the diagonal. And to do that, you just you build a triangle in the corner of your warp. And once you have that angle of the triangle, you just weave diagonally from one side to the other. And then when you get to the other side, you build a triangle on the other selvage and weave in diagonally in this direction. And it's just repeating those two motions over and over again. The history is basically, from what I know, the Navajo practiced wedge weave from about 1870 to 1890, and then it fell out of favor. And most people think that because you're weaving on the diagonal, your edges scallop. And the gold standard at the time for traders and tourists was a perfectly straight edge. So a lot of people think the Navajo stopped doing it just because it was not considered more of a mistake than what the gold standard for Navajo weaving was at the time.
I see.
But it's come back. There's a lot of Navajos who are practicing it today, from my understanding.
That's great. Oh, I think Kathy jumped on using a different device. Great.
Welcome
She's
back.
Wonderful.
All right.
I'm sorry, we lost the internet. We lost the internet here, so I don't know it. Thank you, Mandy. I appreciate you taking over.
No problem. We're glad you're back. Trust me.
So where are we? I'm sorry.
I just talked about the history of wedge weave and how I got started weaving.
Well, I think that leads us into the next question, because when I came on, I heard you talking about the Navajo weaving. And if you've answered this already, I apologize. But I know there's a little controversy about non-Indigenous people using various weaving techniques that are associated with Native Americans, such as the Navajo. So how do you view your work around this issue?
Well, the first wedge weave that I saw was at a guild meeting in Greenville in South Carolina. And it was a slideshow, and the person's weaving, it was a weaving by Ellen Athens. It was a contemporary wedge weave. And of course, immediately when I saw that slide, I had the thought, this is something that I have to learn. So I tried to find information on it. There was none. And it took about 10 years before I could take a workshop with Martha Stanley. I mean, I didn't have internet, I didn't have computer, I didn't have a way to find any information. So Martha has taught many people wedge weave, and she's the person that kind of took it apart, analyzed it, figured it out, and then taught other people about it, as she did with many different techniques. Her workshop was a rug weaving workshop, and she spent half a day on wedge weave. So I went and was happy to learn what she had to teach me, and took off from there. So in the beginning, I did not know that wedge weave was a Navajo weave. And I don't really know when I actually found that out. But once I did, it was kind of thrilling to me, because I'd always appreciated Navajo weavings and basket making and pottery, and I just had a real love for Navajo work. So when I found out that wedge weave was Navajo weaving, that was exciting. But I think if you were to look at my work or the work of other contemporary wedge weavers, you would
Mhm.
never think this is Navajo weaving. I think if someone were to try to copy Navajo weaving and make their work look Navajo, that would be inappropriate. But in my mind, it's just a way of how you lay the yarns in. It's a technique. And the technique is something that anyone can use and use their own design ideas and other things to weave with a technique, not necessarily trying to emulate what the Navajos do with their weaving.
Well, one of the reasons why I asked that question is I was impressed why you're very clear on your writings about your use of the art craft. And I wanted to make sure that we address that with the audience.
And I
Well,
hope I have.
yeah. And when I want to talk some about your designing. How do you design your weavings? Do you draw them out ahead of time? Do you use a computer? Is it all by hand?
I do not use a computer or pictures or anything. Basically, I just have a sheet of paper and here we go. This is a good example. It's a very rough design it's just a plan. And as you can see from this, I just have some of the design elements in the drawing, such as the yellow lines, the zigzag, the green zigzag, where I'm going to have green, where I'm going to have the little triangles, and what color they're going to be, where I'm going to have diagonals through the piece. So that's the plan. I mean, the plan that I have here really fit the piece that I wove. So I have a notebook that's full, and you were going to talk about notebooks too, but full of these little designs. A lot of times they're just on scratch paper or whatever I have that I think of when these ideas come to mind. But I do have a notebook of all these little designs ahead of time, and I just keep them beside me while I'm reading, while I'm weaving, and follow what I have written down. What else? Let's see. Oh, and then as far as colors, I will put a sheet on the floor and take out all the yarn that I have and just start manipulating it until I have an idea from the drawing what colors I have in mind, and I will manipulate those colors until it gets to a point that I think is pleasing, and leave it for maybe a day or two, come back and revisit it and make sure that I still like that order of, I lay them out in the order that I plan to use them, and then they're ready to go, have the design, the colors, and it's all kind of laid out before I start. That's usually the way I work.
Well, going back to your notebook, now this is from someone, I have to confess, I don't keep a notebook. I know I should, but I was curious, what are the benefits for you of keeping a notebook? I mean, is it so, oh, I've already done that, or, oh, I can do this and add to it, or what? Let you answer that.
Well, for example, the one I just showed you, or the one you just showed, Sacred Places Emerald Pool. I did that piece. It was in a gallery and it sold. And then someone had seen it and they approached the gallery and they said, I want a piece just like that. So fortunately, I had the design. Otherwise, I mean, I do have a picture of it, and I guess I could have worked from the picture. But I have little notes about how many shots I have in the diagonal, in the slashes that I have through it, and how many shots were in those little yellow lines. And I have notes with the diagram that will tell me, you can't really, well, maybe you can see it. I've got 7 shots up there for something. So all that information is helpful, of course, if I ever, I mean, it's rare that I would do one again, and it's very difficult to reproduce one just because the colors are not standardized. They're natural dyes, and sometimes it's hard to achieve, for me, exactly the same color. So that's helpful. And also when I teach, I usually have this notebook and I show the people my diagrams and then the finished piece. So there's a lot of reasons to have. I do also have designs in there that I haven't done. So that's there too.
Do you ever find that you combine them? Like, oh, I like this part and I put it together with this part?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I reuse different elements and things like that. And then I have another notebook where I just have basic information about, usually I'll think, well, I'm going to do 2 or 3 pieces. So I figure out how big I want them to be, how much yarn I need, how much warp I wound, all that basic information that I can look back to and see what I've done and how much yarn it took and that kind of thing. And then I have several notebooks, and I have a notebook that I take to my workshops that has examples of traditional Navajo wedge weaves. And the nice thing about that, I've had it for as long as I've been teaching, I think. And then it was always, like I said, the traditional ones from the 1800s. And then just in the last 2 or 3 years, I've been able to get some contemporary wedge weaves, some people who do contemporary wedge weaves, and add them to my notebook, which is really exciting. So I've got examples by Kevin Ospas, Calandra Cook, and Zephyrin Anderson in there.
Wow.
I don't know if people are familiar with any of them, but they're quite accomplished.
Well, I think that could be a class in itself of all of us slackers who don't keep notebooks. We need to take a class from you and start understanding the joy and of making a good notebook.
Well, I don't know how you get along without one.
Well, I think that's why you're a really good teacher, Connie. I'm not. All right. Well, I want to go back to color. I know I'm jumping around a little bit here, but you use color beautifully. I just love your color use. And this next piece is called, we've got 2. I think the one on the left is Refractions, right? And the one on the right is Ice Palace.
Refraction and Ice Palace, yes.
Okay. All right. I think these are incredible examples of how you bring colors together and blend them so beautifully. And I want you to talk some about that. But also, I'm curious, have you found that your color use has changed over time? I tried to look at some of your older pieces and I couldn't really get a sense. Do you feel like your color use has changed?
Yes, mainly because when I first started doing wedge weave, I was using commercially dyed yarn.
Oh, okay.
Just for the first, I'd say the first few that I did. And then very soon, around 2000, I decided that this technique needed natural dyes. And when I first started using natural dyes, I thought to myself that I'm only going to use what I have available locally. And I started just pulling plants, kudzu and whatever was around, and things I didn't even know what they were sometimes. And so I used a lot of marigold too, which makes a brilliant and bright color. But I have found that the colors tarnish over time and don't hold their brightness. So I think a lot of the first few I had are more in the beige color area. And then after a while I said, no, I got to have more color. So I started, and indigo, I think I used that from the beginning because Clemson University had a heritage garden and the manager grew just hedgerows of Indigofera fructicosa, and he didn't do anything with it. And he said, well, you can just come and take as much as you want. And I would just fill up the trunk and bring it home and experiment with it till I got good color. So, but eventually I said, I've got to use cochineal madder, other things that are traditional colors that last and don't fade and give me brighter colors.
Mhm.
So I think in the beginning they were duller and they got brighter as I changed my mind about what I was going to use.
Mhm.
So, and so it has changed somewhat over time.
I love your ability and to explore, you know, just keep being in there and trying new things and learning. And not everybody has a patience for that. I admire that.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot of fun.
Now this next piece is called Paradise Lost with a question mark. Oh, I'm sorry. Mandy, I'm sorry, I'm jumping around. Let me ask one more question about dyeing, and then we're going to come back to this beautiful piece.
Okay.
Why natural dye? Why did you switch?
It just, it at the time it seemed more appropriate for wedge weave. I don't know. And I just, you know, I'd had the background in it, although once I started again, it was completely different from what I learned in the 70s. In the 70s, you use just a tremendous amount of mordant, much more than people do today. And so it was a whole new learning experience. And actually I say that, but the most recent work I've made has not been natural dyes. It's been with commercially dyed yarn. And the reason that happened was I had a solo exhibit in January and February of this year. And they only asked me at the beginning of the previous year. And I had to fill up this small gallery. And they said I could use some of my older work, but I had an idea of what I wanted to present. I wanted it all to work together and be of the same yarn and be cohesive. So I just went to commercially dyed yarn because I knew I didn't have enough time to weave and dye. And so I just said, I just am going to weave and not dye for this show, which was fortunate because I just barely got it done. So
there's a part of that that's reassuring that you struggle to get things done on time.
Well,
that's reassuring.
For this show, I had 7 pieces and one was a diptych.
Oh, wow.
I did nothing but weave, and everything else just got shoved aside for the whole year, except for things that I absolutely had to attend to. But I was weaving like a mad person. And I was virtually putting the labels on the back just a day before they had to be delivered. So
can this show be seen? Is it videoed anywhere or archived anywhere?
I'm not sure. Well, the Blue Spiral, where the show was, has some videos of me on their website.
Okay.
And they have all the work is still on my artist page on their website. And you can tell the work from the show because it's not natural, it's commercially dyed, and it's different from the ones that are naturally dyed. They're very different and easy to tell apart because of that. So all the commercially dyed ones, you can see they're all from that show, but they're all kind of mixed in together, I think. So
all right,
but they're there.
All right, we'll have to go look that up. We'll have to go see that. All right, now, Mandy, I'm going to jump back again. Sorry. Paradise Lost. I can't wait to talk about this piece. It's beautiful. It's just this amazing piece of work. Would you share with us about this work, how it came about? There's interesting stories with it.
Well, I had the idea for it. It's something that was kind of cooking in my mind that I wanted to do. I have a lot of concerns about the environment, and this was done in 210. That, of course, it's only worse now. But there was an exhibit at the Textile Museum that called for pieces, and the topic was green, a color, and a cause. So I thought, I want to make this piece to address the topic at the Textile Museum. So I started it, and I knew there was, after a while, it was taking me so long because it's all done on the diagonal. And I did, normally I don't use the cartoon, but I used a map as a cartoon behind this.
Oh, yeah.
But it's all, like I say, woven on the diagonal. And at some point I realized I was not going to make it in time to enter this into that show. But I went ahead and, of course, finished it. But when I started it, I think I had no idea what I had bitten off to finish. And it turned out to be a lot more harder than I thought it would be. But
What's the size? I know someone's going to ask. What is the size of this piece? Roughly
it's 30 by 40.
30 inches by 40 inches?
Yes.
Wow. It's so detailed. It's amazing.
Thank you.
So what
And
happened to it?
It's in the collection of Craft in America, which I'm very proud of.
Yes. So what is the red line? I have to ask.
It's just my identifier, I guess, or just something I felt like it needed. You could take either one of those answers.
And some, I know people are going to wonder how long did it take you to do this?
I mean, I didn't weave on it all day, every day, but I think it took me about 6 months.
Wow.
So.
Now, when you're weaving, because when I look at that piece, I see light green, but I have a sneaky suspicion that do you have to blend? I know the blue's got different appearances to it. Do you blend while you're weaving? Do you spin the yarns to blend them?
There was no blending at all.
Really?
It's because to get the greens, I dyed with indigo.
Oh, okay. All right.
And then I dyed with goldenrod.
Oh, okay.
So the colors are somewhat variegated in the greens and somewhat in the blue too. And in the white or light blue. So yeah, that's with the natural dyes, you just, and I could, if I used a darker green, it would be less variegated, but I wanted this color, so.
No, it just gives it, such an organic feel. It's not flat at all. It's lovely. So I want to make sure now, and I even took your class, Connie, I should be ashamed to say this, but I want to make sure I understand the diagonal. So it wasn't woven as we're seeing it. Was it woven more vertical?
It was not woven exactly as you're seeing it. It was woven from, where you can see the warp on the edges from, you would turn it 90 degrees and that's how it was woven.
So it was more vertical than horizontal.
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure I understood that. Well, it's an amazing piece. And the show was lesser for it that it didn't make it there. Sorry.
Well, thank you.
These next works, I chose those because one thing I love about your work is the balance. And it's not because there's, this many inches over here and this many inches over there. It's not that kind of symmetrical, even balance. It's a visual balance. And these two pieces, I think, do a lovely job of showing that. So can you talk some about how you find that balance in your work when you're weaving and designing this?
I really don't think that much in terms of balance. So let me say, this is actually one piece, a diptych, that I designed on my little design, like you saw for the other piece, it's designed as one piece. But each of these is about 35 inches wide. And so if I'd left them together, it would be 70 inches long. And I felt like I was gonna have trouble managing a piece 70 inches long if I tried to transport it or anything, so I put it into a diptych. But in terms of balance, I had the little design like I showed for the other one. I laid out the dark colors ahead of time, and they're just more or less sequenced. I
Uh-huh.
would use a shuttle full of one color, and then when it ran out, I'd go to the next color, and not always a full shuttle. And that was kind of randomly done, just as the colors would run out when I would go to another one. And then the blocks obviously I used a darker brown and a more gold color. And I just try to use some elements of design that threes and odd numbers are pleasant compared to all odd or even or whatever, just to break up the design and not make it unexpected instead of expected, by repeating the same thing too much. And then I also knew when I laid this out, I had all the orange diagonals in my design, and I wanted it to build up and then diminish. And I also wanted the beginning to be darker and build up more into the lighter part, and then just a little bit dark at the end. But I wanted the lighter part to dominate in terms of the green. But all of that is not, it's more like a intuitive thing. I wish I could say, oh well, I used this thought and this tool or this theory or whatever, but a lot of it is just intuitive, looking at the colors and thinking about, I always want to have contrast. That's really important, that there's dark and there's light, because if you don't, everything kind of gets lost in the design. So that's always important to me, to have a good amount of contrast or in the piece. So,
And I think that's where the balance comes from, is that, the eye travels so nicely through this piece and just, wanders about and comes back home again. I just love how this works. And I think it is intuitive. I don't think that's something that is easily taught. So it makes you so good at what you do, Connie.
The gallery, I shouldn't say this, but the gallery owner, and I don't know if I believe him, but he said he could have sold this piece 2 or 3 times over.
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
Which is,
yeah. This is
really
called the
wonderful to hear.
Grasslands Diptych, right?
Hmm?
This is called the Grasslands Diptych.
Yes.
I don't know if we said that or not. I want to give it credit. It is a beautiful piece.
Thank you very much.
I'm always curious when I meet artists and you kind of got to weaving through a little bit of a roundabout, because you had to go into home ec to actually take weaving, right?
Right.
If you hadn't found that home ec class and that weaving class, what do you think you would have gone? Where would you have gone, do you think?
Well, I did go. I dropped out of art after 2 years because they convinced me that I was not an artist.
Oh,
Then it's okay. There was not that much more I was interested in doing, so it was fine. But art can be very critical. But anyway, or at least art teachers. And I think now it's better, but in the 70s, they were just not giving out compliments for anything. So, but anyway, I changed my major to botany, got a degree in botany and a degree in soil science, and was basically pursuing those fields until it just wasn't working out for me. It just, the things I was interested in sustainable agriculture, but what I ended up doing with both, with all of it was looking for contaminants in plants and then in soils. So that was not where my heart was. And it didn't seem like there was anything else available for me to do. And so at some point, when I started having a family, I turned back more to weaving and started doing residencies in schools, teaching and doing my own weaving and trying to get it out there as much as I could. So I was still weaving. I mean, the whole time I was as soon as I graduated from my master's degree in soil science, I immediately had a paycheck. I got a loom, I mean, right away. And so I was always weaving more as just a hobby on the sideline. But once my science dreams kind of fizzled, I went into it with a lot more concentration and pursuit than I had before.
Well, let me ask you, that concentration and pursuit was, I'm trying to figure out how to ask this. Which came first, the wedge weave or the concentration and the pursuit?
The concentration and pursuit.
Okay.
Yeah. And I knew I was interested in weft face weaving, and I did bound weave for about 15 years.
Oh, really?
And I entered those in a lot of shows, and you know, they were accepted and did well, but the wedge weave really caught me and took hold of me. So
Lucky for us. Lucky for us.
well, thank you.
I know a lot of people are listening and they're thinking about, they want to know, because you get into galleries, you are in galleries, you're a representative. How does that happen?
Well, I want to say it was luck, but there was a lot leading up to getting into a gallery, and there are a lot of galleries you can get into that like to have your work on their walls to decorate their galleries, but are not able to sell so much. To get into a gallery that can actually sell your work is a whole different ball game. And this particular gallery that I'm in Asheville, I had actually pursued them a couple of times, and other galleries too. I'd sent my work, my resume. A lot of times I heard nothing, or I would just, they weren't interested. Most of the time I heard nothing. And then, but I think the reason I got into the gallery in Asheville is because I had postcards a lot printed. When I was in several shows or had teaching engagements coming up, I would have a postcard, and I always sent Blue Spiral in Asheville a postcard. So one day a few years ago, I just got an email in my inbox from the curator there. It said, would you like to be in this, what did they call it? It was a show they used to have every January. It was an invitational to new artists that they would have in January. So they asked me to be in that. And then I sold a couple of pieces from that show, and they asked me if they could represent me. And I've been there ever since. So, and then of course, this year I had a solo there, which was an incredible opportunity for me. So, I mean, it was really incredible, but I've been doing this for decades, and it took a long time to get into a gallery. But I really think it's just because they kept seeing my work, it kept showing up on these postcards. I don't know if you've heard the saying that you have to see someone's work 10 times before you start recognizing it. And of course, your work has to be somewhat consistent so that they can recognize it as being the same person. So I guess I reached a saturation point at some somewhere along the way and got their attention. That's the only thing I can think of.
Well, that's great. That's so helpful for folks who are, wondering what's the next step and how do you get recognized. I never thought about postcards. That's a great idea.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's so, it's challenging because you see really young people who are represented there and doing well. And they were able to break in without, I mean, I feel like they've done well kind of from the beginning, but persistence is a good thing to have. So.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So what is next for you? When are you going to write a book? You're in books. You need to have your own book.
I don't know. I had such a hard time finding information about how to do wedge weave. I do have online in the digital commons some instructions that I put there. It was from the Textiles Society of America meeting that I went to. I think it was in 2010 or something. And because of that, they wanted written documentation of our talk. So I put that online and it's been downloaded almost 10,000 times.
Oh, yeah.
So I feel like what I have is more or less out there. And I don't know. I don't have any plans to write a book. So
what is next for you?
Well, the show that I did, I titled it Ecological Survey, and all the pieces in the show are representative of some ecosystem or part of nature. And the two pieces I have planned on my loom and in my colors right now are a continuation of that idea. So
Now, this was the show at Blue Spiral?
yes.
Okay. All
So
right.
I just want to keep working kind of in the ideas that I had for that. I want to keep, because I had more ideas than I completed. So.
Gee, maybe you could put it in Convergence exhibit. Then we can all see it. No pressure. No pressure.
Yeah. I do need to
All
get
right, Mandy. I don't have the questions. I can't see the questions. So you're going to have to be our question person today. So let's go to questions.
All right, I'll do my best, no problem. Let's go to questions. All right.
And I know there's been some questions in chat. I encourage you all to put them over in the Q&A.
Okay, our first question is from Micala. How do you distinguish between contemporary wedge weave and other wedge weave?
What I guess the only other wedge weave would be Navajo weaving. And like I said, I don't think you would look at my work and think, oh, it's traditional or indigenous or whatever. And all of the contemporary work that I've seen, I've never seen any that I thought, oh, they are trying to copy a traditional weave. So the Navajo wedge weaves are, to me, very distinctive. And even the modern ones, they're not as, the modern ones are different, of course, from the traditional ones, but they're just like when anyone uses a technique, they bring what they have to it and make it their own. And so it's hard to, I mean, it's easy, I think, to distinguish between the traditional ones and the modern ones. If you've seen any of the traditional ones, you know, especially they're recognizable through the colors, and a lot of the design are very similar. But if you look up the traditional ones, you'll see a difference between those and contemporary ones.
Sure. Thank you. All right, our next question is from Nan. When you make certain shaped images, do they get distorted once it's off the loom?
Yes, very much so. The one that Kathy showed where I had the diagram in the back, you could see from the diagram, the yellow, I don't know if you recall or not, but the yellow lines,
We can.
those were not done in wedge weave. Those were woven horizontally. Okay, here, the yellow lines in there. They were woven horizontally as opposed to diagonally for the rest of it. And then when I took it off the loom and I do a wet finish, which is basically putting down some plastic, putting down my piece and putting wet toweling on it overnight and then taking it off and letting it air dry. The yellow lines relaxed into that same scallop that you find on the edge. And I mean, I was thrilled with that. It's not what I expected to happen or what knew would happen, but it did. And then I've had, I had another piece that it was after 18088. And I had tried to make the scallops on the edge larger and more pronounced. And I had kind of crowded my weft threads. And when I took it off the loom, it was completely distorted and just kind of a wadded mess. And so I thought, I'm just going to have to take this apart and try again or do something different. But I did the wet finish, and after I did that, it was perfectly flat. So that was wonderful too.
Thank you. Karen LeBlanc has a question. How do you decide how to finish a piece, and what is your preferred finishing method?
I use a woven selvage. It comes from the Techniques of Rug Weaving with by Peter Collingwood. And that's what I use most of the time. I've done some smaller pieces where I just do a half Damascus and turn the warp ends underneath and then mount it so that the warp ends are hidden. I've also done on a smaller piece woven a hem in a plain weave before I started the wedge weave, and used the plain weave as a showy hem in a way. I've let it show a lot of times in a contrasting color. So as many ways as there are to finish any kind of weft face weave are appropriate for wedge weave too. And I should have mentioned that when I took the class from Martha, she pointed out to me that the Techniques of Rug Weaving had wedge weave in there, which I'd had since the 70s. But the problem was I did look in the index of that book for how to do wedge weave, and it was not in the index. So I thought it wasn't there. And that book has a notoriously poor index, I found out later. It was in the table of contents, but since it wasn't in the index, I assumed it wasn't in the book. But there are 2 or 3 pages in Collingwood's book on.
What, that's his Collingwood's book you're talking about?
Yeah, the Techniques of Rug Weaving.
Good. So we have a question from Denise. What type or brand of yarn do you prefer to use?
Well, for about 20 years, I used Henry's Attic. What's the name of it? It was a rug yarn that they had. I can't remember the name of it right now. I'd have to go get it because I haven't used it in a while, because it kept diminishing in quality. And I had even kind of complained about it. The twist would be over twisted or under twisted. It wasn't consistent, and I didn't know what was happening. And finally, they just discontinued it. So I found a very similar, if not exactly the same, rug yarn from R&M Yarns, and I've used that. And then this last group, and that all that yarn was yarn that it was all white and I dyed it. And the warp yarns are 8/4 linen, which I almost always use. Sometimes on smaller pieces, I use cotton or a different size linen. And then for the last group of pieces that I made in the last year with commercially dyed yarn, I used Donegal tweed for that.
Where do you mostly get that?
Some of the Donegal tweed, I get it from Webb's, and I've also gotten some from Ireland.
Oh, okay.
I was there one time and I went in a shop that had beautiful Donegal tweed, and I bought a piece. I bought enough to make a piece that represented what Ireland for me, that I was very happy with. So I'd used it before and knew what to expect. But yeah, I ordered it from both places. A lot of the colors are very similar, but one might have a color or two that the other doesn't. So I could get a little bit better range by ordering from both of them.
Thank you. Another question, Charlotte Switzer, do you use weld as a dye?
I have not used weld on my yarn. I've always used goldenrod, which only when it's blooming in the fall. And I've thought about using weld, and I actually have some, but I haven't yet. I've used it on some cloth one time, but I haven't used it on yarn.
Great. Our next question is from Patricia Bidding. She says, quote, maybe I should remember as a past student, you prefer working on an upright or horizontal loom. Your class is so memorable. I learned so much more than weaving, end quote.
Oh, well, thank you so much. That's really nice. I use a horizontal loom for the most part for almost everything I have for everything you saw today. I do have a vertical loom that I occasionally use and a little Hocket loom that I use sometimes, but I'd say 90% or more is done on the horizontal loom. All the larger pieces. It's a Maycomber that I've had since the 80s.
How wide is it?
It's 48 inches. But most of my work is like between, like the grasslands was 30, and I have done one as wide as 40 on there, but usually it's even a bit smaller than that, 2 to 3 feet wide.
Another good question from Karen LeBlanc. What do you use to, or how do you hang your pieces, since the wedge weave is an uneven edge and absolutely wonderful, she says.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I take a piece of Velcro and stitch it to cotton webbing, and then I stitch that through the entire piece. I take a lighter thread, usually a cotton carpet warp or something like that. And but I've used rayon and other things if the color is better, and stitch it through so that it catches one warp, and pull it back, and then move over my stitching about an inch each time until the cotton webbing is stitched. I'll do the top and the bottom. The Velcro, as you probably all know, is very difficult to stitch through. So if you stitch it to cotton webbing, it's very easy to stitch through. And then I use the soft Velcro on the weaving, and then I put the loop part on a stick and stick that to the weaving. And I have 2 eye hooks where it can be hung through the eye hooks, And all that is hidden behind the weaving. None of that shows.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Let's see. And our next question is from Susan, and she requested, would you repeat where your write-up on Wedge Weave was published?
Okay, if you just Google my name and look for the Digital Commons, it will be there. It'll say the topic is contemporary interpretation of a traditional Navajo weaving technique. But it's on, like I said, it's on the Digital Commons.
Okay, I'll write that in the chat. Digital Commons. Okay. Oh, Elizabeth.
Oh, okay, Elizabeth's got it.
She's so quick. Perfect.
Well, I think we're running out of time today, which I can't believe, especially since I missed some of it. Connie, thank you for being so flexible and kind of going with the flow. Thank you to everybody watching for being so flexible and going with the flow. It was wonderful to have you here today.
Well, I thank you so much for having me. And once again, I thank Tapestry Weavers South for sponsoring the episode. But it's been wonderful and I appreciate it very much.
I encourage everyone to go to ConnieLippertArt.com and see her work. And she has links to different things. And there's videos on Connie. So check those out. Go to our website and you'll learn more about our work and information. If you, and again, I do want to thank Tapestry Weavers South, a wonderful weaving organization. Like I said earlier, they do a beautiful exhibit. I think they have an exhibit up right now, if I'm not mistaken. If not now, it will be up soon. And I encourage you all to take a look at that. I believe it's in North Carolina. And Tapestry Weavers South, if I'm wrong, I apologize. Google them and you'll see more about their website and where their exhibit is right now. If you would like to sponsor a episode of Textiles and Tea, or your guild or your business, please go to our website at weavespindye.org and you can learn more about taking on a sponsorship for yourself or your guild. We appreciate all the support that we get for these programs, whether it's Textiles and Tea, Careers in Textiles, Spinning and Weaving Week. All of those are funded through donations to the Fiber Trust. And if you like the programming and you want to see more, please continue to send in those donations to the Fiber Trust so that we can plan new and exciting things for every year. You can do that. You can also join at weavespindye.org. If you've missed an episode, you want to watch this one again, please do so. You can see them at the HTA Facebook page, and they will be put up on YouTube. It takes a while to get those up. Somebody was asking about one the other day, and it takes us a while to get those up, but they will be. But I encourage you to subscribe, because if you do, you get a notice that will let you know a new episode has been uploaded. So there you got a couple of options there. Next week, we're going international. We've got Callie Booker will be on, and we're very excited to have her on. If you're not familiar with her work, you might want to take a look. Thank you all so much for joining us. And again, I'm sorry, it was a wacky day, and we appreciate your patience. Thank you, Connie, for being so patient with us also. And I hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next week. Happy tea.